Hello, welcome to Patriot Pass. My name is Lake Green, and I'm so excited to be back here on the channel to bring you the 6th video of our fall lecture series titled The Fall of 1776, where we take an in-depth, step-by-step look at, my opinion, the most pivotal campaign in American history. Without the fall of 1776, without the way that the campaign unfolds, without the victories that America ultimately will achieve at the end of it, even though it's a crazy, trying, unpredictable, illogical time in history, there's no logical reason the Americans should win and be successful in this campaign, but yet they somehow are. If we don't have that outcome, we don't have a country. Before we get into the roots and the topic of this video, I want to again remind you, I can only talk so much in a 10-minute video and a 15-minute lecture, so if you're hungry for more information or you just want to learn more about the campaign in general, please pick up this book. It's titled 1776 by David McCullough. Mr. McCullough passed away last month. May he rest in peace. A great historian. This book will tell you everything you need to know about the 1776 campaign. It is phenomenal. So please check it out. It's really easy to read. It's palatable. It's engaging. It's exciting. It's really, a great book. For the 6th topic of this series, for the 6th video, we will be discussing the death of Nathan Hale. Nathan Hale was in many ways America's first martyr, the earliest martyr for the American nation, and his last words, his famous last words, a lot of people know, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." Whether he said them or not is still a debate to this day, but nonetheless, Nathan Hale is worth remembering as he was a true American patriot and a brave soul who gave his life for the cause of independence. Nathan Hale was born in 1755 in Coventry, Connecticut. His father was a deacon. His great-uncle was an early abolitionist named Edward Everett Hale. As I always like to point out, people always talk about slavery in America. The earliest calls for abolitionism in the entire North American continent originated in New England, and this is almost 100 years before the American Civil War. There's already a movement to abolish slavery occurring there. And his great-grandfather was Jonathan Hale, who actually was a reverend that was involved with the Salem witch trials in 1692. So he has a lot of deep roots in New England already, even though the country is very young at this point. But he's from old stock there already, without a doubt. Basically, Nathan Hale joined the Continental Army at the age of 20 in 1775. He had attended Yale University, Yale College, and graduated with high honors and became a teacher at the age of 18, teaching in New London, Connecticut. His classmate was Benjamin Talmadge, who would later become a major and an officer in the American Army in the Revolutionary War. And at first, what the outbreak of Lexington and Concord in 1775, Hale is hesitant to join the fight for independence, or at the time wasn't even really a fight for independence yet. It was a fight against the British, a rebellion. It wasn't really for independence until a year later. But it was really when Talmadge sent him a very inspiring letter that summer in 1775, urging him to enlist and join the Continental Army. He does, and participates in the end parts of the siege of Boston. Then marches down with his Connecticut unit. He's commissioned a first lieutenant and marches down to New York City that summer of 1776. Now we are in a fight for independence after the declaration by Continental Congress on July 4th of that year. Hale himself is eventually appointed as one of the earliest members of Knowlton's Rangers. We talked about them a few videos ago at the Battle of Harlem Heights. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Knowlton's elite reconnaissance scouts, the first special forces unit in the entire American military. Hale's one of the earliest volunteers, or not volunteers, rather earliest people handpicked, selected for that unit, showing his worth as a soldier. But then, after the fall of Brooklyn and the American retreat into Manhattan, Washington is desperate for knowledge on the British troop movements in the city. Unfortunately, he has no cavalry and no eyes. He can't see what the British are doing. He has no idea what Howe's planning, and so he actually calls for a spy. And obviously, goes without saying, being a spy is a very dangerous job. But back then, even today it's probably the same, but back then in the conventional rules of warfare, if you were a spy and you were found as a spy, you were hanged on the spot. You weren't given parole, anything. You were just hanged because it was deemed very dishonorable to not fight openly in the field of battle. And it was, viewed as a very, lowly thing to do in war. Hale, although he knows this, still takes the opportunity, volunteers for Washington himself, and says, I will be your spy. On September 8th, 1776, Hale is sailed from Harlem, northern Manhattan, up the East River, into the Long Island Sound, out and around, and dropped off in modern-day Huntington Township, Long Island. And then he actually begins to walk up the road into occupied Brooklyn and poses as a Dutch school teacher looking for work. Here is one of Hale's fatal flaws. I understand he's an early spy. He has no alias for himself. He goes in there using his own name. He says, I'm Nathan Hale. I'm a Dutch school teacher, out of work, looking for opportunities. He didn't even have an alias for himself. He walked around carrying his Yale diploma. Not a good idea if you're going to be a spy. Not a good idea at all. Eventually, though, a week later, the Battle of Harlem Heights happens, the landing's at Kips Bay, and Manhattan falls to British occupation. The British move into Manhattan. The bulk of their army is now in Manhattan. Hale has no choice but to follow them into Manhattan from Brooklyn, and that's what he does. Being in Manhattan is a lot harder to remain concealed. It's a city. Even though it's a small one at the time, as we noted in a last video with the Great Fire in New York, there's only 25,000 people living there. There's only 3 towns in Lower Manhattan: Harlem, Greenwich Village, and New York City and Lower Manhattan itself. But it's close quarters. So Hale quickly exposes himself. There are not a lot of ideas on how he was captured. One theory is that Major Robert Rogers of the Queen's Rangers, if anybody here has watched the show Turn on AMC, his character plays a role in that show. A great show, by the way. I highly recommend it, even though it's really not that historically accurate. Great show. One theory is that Major Robert Rogers identifies him in a tavern, recognizes him as somebody who might be loyal to the American cause, tricks him into thinking that he himself is a patriot, gets Hale to expose himself and his true identity as an American spy, and then arrests him and brings him to the British commander, William Howe. Another theory is that Hale has a cousin, who he did, that was a loyalist and living in or in around the New York area, and gave him away. So either family betrayed him or Robert Rogers got him. One or the other. Hale is found and exposed as a spy. He's arrested by the British. He's interrogated by Howe on the night of September 21st. At the same time that Hale is captured, this is the aftermath of the Great Fire of New York. So people are already pissed off that this fire has happened. The British are seething and livid. They already had logistical problems with their troops before, and now this has just compounded that. So it's almost like they need a scapegoat. I mean, it's not like they blamed him for the fire, but it's still in the same chain of events. Hale's arrested right at this time, right in the aftermath of the fire. William Howe interrogates him and questions him, even though there's no evidence found on Hale that he has committed treasonous activities. I think pretty much there's not a lot of questioning the viability of this. I think he's kind of done. Hale knows it. Hale knows he's been exposed. There's no way out for him. He spends the night in a room in William Howe's headquarters in Manhattan. And then the next morning, on September 22nd, he's marched up to a field. He is read aloud his, sentencing. And he is hung. He actually requested a Bible and a clergyman. Both times these requests were denied. He was not allowed to make peace with God before he was killed. A pretty sad act by the British there. But by all accounts, he really composed himself well. Captain John Montresor, who, under a flag of truce the next day, would meet with Captain William Hull of the Connecticut militia, the Connecticut line in the Continental Army, informs him of Hale's death. Hull is Hale's friend, and Montresor, kind of recounts this story that Hale is marched up, is very stoic, and in his last words says, "I have only but one regret, that I am only possessing or only have one life to lose for my country." So that's the famous one-liner, the one sentence by Nathan Hale that a lot of people to this day know, and it's still repeated. Whether he actually said it or not, nobody knows. But nonetheless, Nathan Hale is hung and dies as America's first spy and an early martyr for the cause of American independence. And it's lamented by many in the Army. People who knew him are very sad at that. And we remember him at 21 years old as a young American patriot who gave his life for the cause of a free and independent America. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time on Patriot Patch, and we look forward to the rest of this lecture series. You have a wonderful day, everyone.